Why are people, especially the younger generations, so skeptical about capitalism? If our society, our economy, and our civilization are to advance, we must understand this feeling and resolve it.
This is the Economics for Business podcast. We are here to help all businesses become champions for customers and value, improving lives with preferred and innovative products and services. We offer you the knowledge and tools to make your entrepreneurial journey a successful one. Now, here's your host, Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. There's a lot of negative feeling expressed about capitalism. It's viewed as exploitative and extractive, and is creating undesirable outcomes like income and wealth inequality and environmental damage. Yet reality tells the opposite story. As innumerable writers, analysts, economists, and historians have pointed out, capitalism is associated with the greatest improvement in living standards and quality of life that humankind has ever experienced. Longer lifespans and life expectancies, better health, and healthier conditions ranging from everyday sanitation to reliable food supplies, which means less hunger. Better education, ever-expanding emancipation of oppressed minorities, the continuous advance of scientific knowledge, reliable low-cost energy supply, greater comfort, and of course, mobile phones and the internet. In other words, universal improvement. The capitalism deniers can't refute all this, so they choose another angle of attack. They accuse capitalism of moral failures. It's unethical. It promotes sectional goals rather than social goals. It favors a narrow elite deploying financial capital over a broader majority deploying their human capital. That's a distorted point of view. It misses all the beauty of entrepreneurial businesses identifying the ways in which their customers are aiming to improve their lives and then presenting options they can choose to help them do so. Capitalism is the most moral and ethical of pursuits because it succeeds when customers meet their own goals through the products and services of business. What's the cause of us interpreting this beauty and morality in the wrong way? One culprit is education. Teachers and teaching institutions planting these bad ideas and erroneous interpretations into young people's heads before their mental capacity to compare them to reality is fully developed. This twisted teaching seems to be most rampant in universities. Although it's broader than that, it's creeping into the business world as what we observe as wokeness at the corporate level, and the imposition of ESG compliance by fund pools like BlackRock and state and union pension funds. Happily, some universities and some teachers recognize the seriousness of the problem for civilizational stability and are seeking to balance the scale by proactively teaching the ethics, morality, and social contribution of business. A leader of this movement is Alan Mendenhall. Tellingly, Alan approaches these economic issues from a background of literary studies and legal studies and philosophy. He's now Associate Dean at the College of Business at Troy University and Executive Director of the Manuel H. Johnson Center for Political Economy. He and his associates have created a new teaching program to help college students with an interest in business to absorb and understand an ethical and moral perspective that's not anti-business. Let's hear about it. Alan, welcome to the Economics of Business podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Hunter. I'm really happy to be here.
We're going to talk today about the new teaching program that you've initiated at Troy University. If I've got it right, you're teaching students about the ethics and the social contribution of business, and that's important to us at Economics for Business. We want to explore why that's needed, why business is denigrated in certain circles in the U.S. and around the world, I suppose, and the negative impressions that some students have. But before we get there, let's start with you, Alan. You teach in a business school, but if one were to go to alanmendenhall.com, we'd find a great intellectual breadth and depth. You explore many parts of our existence other than business. You teach and write about literature and philosophy and political economy, among other things. So tell us about your range of intellectual interests and what you teach besides business and how business fits in.
Well, I'm an unusual administrator in a business school because I am a lawyer with a PhD in English. And 10 years ago, if you had told me that I would be teaching in a business school and working as an administrator in a business school, I probably would have laughed in your face. I just would have been just too inconceivable. But through the accidents of life, I have found myself in this position. And it's not that unnatural of a course in some ways. As a lawyer, I represented nonprofit corporations and litigated cases. And I got my PhD in English because I had a love of literature, and I knew that I would never find a home in an English department at most universities. And I didn't really want that anyway, because I wanted to make more money than a college English professor made. And so I tried to find a way that I could marry my literary interests and my legal interests and become a law professor. And I worked as an assistant attorney general. I worked as the staff attorney of the Alabama Supreme Court. I worked in private practice and somehow managed to skip over all the faculty parts and jump into a law school as an administrator. And I was associate dean at Faulkner University Thomas Good Jones School of Law for 4 years and directed a center there. And then was brought to Troy to direct the Manuel H. Johnson Center for Political Economy here. And it has been a gratifying experience. And I have enjoyed being in a business school. And I feel as though the business schools have a little bit more latitude to teach some courses that you wouldn't get to teach in other disciplines.
So I think we can call that an entrepreneurial career, Alan. So I don't want to be guilty of misphrasing, but what I read from the nature of your course and what you're trying to do, that you do have a concern that in our society, a lot of people, maybe perhaps especially young people today, but maybe it's not just young people, and particularly young people in the university system, hold business in, shall we say, low esteem. They see it as maybe untrustworthy or exploitative. Maybe profit's not a worthy goal. Let's start by trying to understand why that is. Why do they have that perception, if I phrased it correctly?
Well, I think it goes back to just basic Disney movie caricatures of bad guy businesses. But then there were also scandals like WorldCom and Enron in the early 2000s that really cast business in a bad light. But if you think about it, this portrayal of business is bad and people try to associate it with capitalism, but there's really no evidence that human beings are greedier now, or, the miserliness is worse now than it was before the advent of capitalism. That's why we have the ancient legend of King Midas talking about his greed. All the things he touched turned to gold, and his greed got the better of him. So it's sort of silly to suggest that capitalism is what ushered in this new era of greed and terrible things that are associated with business. But actually, we want to tell people the positive stories of business. We want to teach students that profits are good, that businesses add value to society by producing goods and services, creating jobs, innovating, making our lives easier and better. It's funny because I received an email from one critic of our program that said something to the effect of, well, you just want a bunch of corporations to go out and make profits. And I actually responded to this email. I said, of course, that's what corporations do. They maximize profits for shareholders. If a company doesn't make profit, first of all, a profit is just total revenue minus expenses. If the numbers are in imbalance there, and you don't have more revenue than you have expenses, then your company's going to go out of business. And what good is that going to do anybody in society? Nothing at all. But people tend to just throw the word profit around like it's bad without even thinking about what does that mean? Well, if a company doesn't make profits, it doesn't hire people, it doesn't produce goods and services, it doesn't innovate, it doesn't do any of these things that we expect businesses to do and that have really enriched our lives by comparison historically in astounding ways.
So this negative perception, you said it maybe comes from what kids grew up with, watching cartoons on TV, or bad characters in movies. Maybe it came from the media. What about parents? Are they putting the wrong ideas into kids' heads these days?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I mean, that's a sort of a difficult answer for me to give, because I don't really know how everybody's raising their children. Mm-hmm. But I suspect, that in general, business has a bad rap in the public mind in a way that maybe it didn't in, say, 19th century America, where you had the Protestant work ethic, and there was a celebration of the commercial republic and of exchange and business. There was a time when the quote unquote the businessman was a trope that was a positive trope. It was a good thing to be a businessman and to go out and create value for other people. And business people were the good guys. They listened to customers. They tried not to commit fraud and cheat. They tried to find compromises. They had to negotiate. They had to cooperate. They had to venture out and form new ways of doing things. So they had to innovate. They had to take care of their employees by making sure that the company was sound. There were all kinds of associations with business that were just far more positive in 19th century America that we sort of lost over the course of the progressive era, and then the rise of all this sort of neo-Marxism that has infiltrated universities. And I think more so than parents, the universities are to blame. I mean, we have a generation of parents now that were sort of indoctrinated at universities, and so therefore maybe spreading misinformation or misperceptions to their children. But I think if we're going to blame any particular institution, it would have to be the universities and the faculty that serve in universities.
So you've conceived, therefore, Alan, as a course in a university to reverse that perception and talk positively, as you say, about the social role and ethics of business. So tell us how you conceived of the course and who you're targeting, what you're trying to achieve. How will you approach this from a course standpoint?
Well, I really wish the story were sexier than it is, but we have a robust MA program in economics for our students. And we have outside donors who generously fund the tuition and fees of our students. And not only that, those MA students work as graduate assistants. So they essentially have a job working for the Manuel H. Johnson Center. They work as research assistants and their tuition is paid for. And it's excellent and it's a great program and we do really good things. But we knew we needed to do something more for undergraduates. We needed an undergraduate program because that's really the core of the business school. And the Manuel H. Johnson Center needed to reach more undergraduate students and get more undergraduate econ majors. So we conceived of this program, and we thought that my colleague Dan Sutter and I had both read Vivek Ramaswamy's Woke Inc. at the same time, and we thought, wow, there is a misconception that all this woke stuff is good, and these young people want to do great things. They want to be change agents, to institute all sorts of progress in society. But we wanted to show them that actually this woke revolution leads businesses down the path to unethical behaviors. And if businesses do what businesses are supposed to do, maximize profits for shareholders, well, that actually yields a lot more ethical behavior than this wokeness does.
And so if I asked you, hey, I'm thinking of signing up for your course, Alan, what can I expect in terms of classes and teachers and coursework, and what will I be doing? What will I be hearing? Can you give us a little bit more detail?
Well, sure. So the program goes for a full year, and it's actually not a 4-credit course. So right now it's all extracurricular, and we're hoping to add, we have a morality of capitalism course that we offer in the economics department that we would like to incorporate into the program so that students will, in fact, get course credit while they take it. Right now, they're taking it out of voluntary participation. They apply to be in it, and we have our first cohort of students. We actually met on Monday of this week, and they will be reading Jim Ottison's 7 Deadly Economic Sins. They will be reading Vivek Ramaswamy's Woke Inc. They will be reading different articles about wokeness or ESG and figuring out what these acronyms mean and why they might be more problematic than they seem at first blush. I think a young person is very attracted to something that sounds like, environmental, social governance, I want to help the environment. I want to make it better. Oh, yeah, I think businesses should be socially responsible. These things just sort of naturally appeal to students, but they haven't been taught to look at them with a critical eye and see sort of the more sinister side to these developments.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about history that we could look at in terms of the benefits of capitalism. And I mentioned in my notes to you, I like a book by Hans Rosling called Factfulness, which is, if you look at what capitalism has actually achieved, it's pretty darn good. And he's got, I think, 16 good things getting better and 16 bad things getting less bad. And it's things like educational levels and child mortality levels and those kinds of things. So do you take that big sweep as well, or are you focused on these current issues of wokeism and so on?
Yeah, no, I think we do plan to take that sweep. We want to teach the good old Doe commerce theory that commerce has a civilizing effect on people, and it makes them act more rationally. It actually minimizes violence. So countries that trade with one another are less likely to go to war with each other. So although economics always involves competition and businesses are always in competition, there is also an element of coordination and cooperation that must go on. And, I think we as a human species, we live much longer. We have much wealthier lives than we would have just 2 centuries ago. And the fruits of capitalism enable us to give charitably, to create jobs, to spend money, to do things like exercise for fun, not because we're out there in a field working, but we actually do it just to make our bodies healthy. We're able to raise children. We're able to enjoy leisure and watch football and play golf in ways and numbers that previous generations would never have been able to even conceive of. So in this sense, I think capitalism is inherently virtuous and not evil. If you look at the way sort of pre-modern people lived, and they were, rootless and dirt poor, and they were tribal, and they didn't live good lives, and they had short lifespans, and they didn't have modern medicine. And really, capitalism has ushered in this incredible era of human prosperity. And it is frightening that people are attacking it sort of without thinking through what it is they're attacking, and looking at sort of the long sweep of human history and just the standard of living over the course of centuries, and what economic freedom and private property rights and the like have done for human flourishing.
A quick note: Economics for Business is a uniquely Austrian platform to help entrepreneurs build value-generating businesses at every stage of the entrepreneurial journey. We've now launched online with an outstanding database of entrepreneurial knowledge, tools to solve specific business problems, and a community exchange to share information and experiences. Check it out at econ4business.com. That's ECON, 4, business.com. Explore and let us know what works best for you in the feedback section. Now, back to our conversation.
One of the points that Rosling makes is that we have a tendency to focus on gaps. So what you've just described is the rising tide raises all the boats. We're all getting better. Everything's getting better all the time. Steven Pinker says that. but Rosling said, hey, we focus on gaps. We worry about the billion at the bottom of the pyramid that haven't attained that kind of level of improvement. What do you teach about that?
Well, what we teach is largely based on what the authors have written. So we're very text-based in our approach to teaching. So whatever author has, whatever an author has spoken on, we'll focus on that particular text. But I will say, if your point is that there are ebbs and flows to history, and that it is not an inexorable chain of progress, that we can just look at the aqueducts of Rome and the just basic plumbing that Rome had, and see how long it took Western Europe to regain that degree of sophistication in plumbing after the fall of the Roman Empire. It took centuries to regain that. So that was not just a straight chain of obvious progress. There was, history is full of fits and starts and progress and regress. And so I think we see regress throughout history, and I'm afraid we may be entering into a period of regress as we keep embracing, ideas that we know contradict basic economic laws.
Yeah, but look, before we go there, because I'm fascinated by that idea about are we regressing, but just to drill down a little bit further on the ethics of business and the morality of it. I always think that economics has some blame here, because economics became mathematicized, if that's a word. It's all mathematics. And there's no morality and no humanity and no ethics in those mathematics. It's all about equations and algebraic formula and maximizing and minimizing and that kind of stuff. So I wonder, do you blame economics at all for any of this problem?
Well, certainly the economics profession, if that can be a concept divorced from economics as a discipline, I think the economics profession, I believe you and I both sort of subscribe to the Austrian tradition. And so we're sort of averse to this mathematical modeling and sort of regression after regression after regression, where you try to reduce human behavior to some algorithmic predictive behavior. And that is, I think, dehumanizing. And I do think that has led not just to problems with economics itself as a discipline, but it's also led to problems with the reputation of economics as a discipline, because you have people, people who criticize economics and economists as being sort of uninterested in the human element and being, not lacking compassion or, all the like. But there's really a humanistic element to economics, I think, to economics historically understood, whether you're looking at classical economics and Adam Smith and David Hume, whoever, or if you're looking at the Austrian tradition and praxeology and Mises and Hayek or whoever. I think that this classical liberal tradition is very humanizing, and it teaches about the ways commerce cultivates virtue, and it teaches how the pursuit of honorable profit leads businesses to act in good faith and with integrity, to find parties with which to cooperate and exchange, to provide good products for consumers. These are all elements of the sort of the history of economics. We actually have a history of economic thought that we offer in our MA program, and our MA program has a course in public choice economics and a course in Austrian economics. So those are all core elements of our program.
Yeah, I also like Deirdre McCloskey. She's at the University of Chicago, I think, but she talks about humanomics. She wants to take economics back to its human components, and she talks about the 7 virtues in economics that led to the great enrichment, as she calls it. So we do have some economists calling for that focus on ethics and virtue and so on. Just to polish off profit. We mentioned it before, but in Austrian economics, which you brought up, we see profit as a signal from the customer, from the marketplace, to keep on doing what you're doing. That's a good resource allocation that you've devised there. So do you think we can get that into students' perception, that profit is a good signal?
You just have to get them sitting down and listening. But I found that the students that we've talked to about just sort of the knowledge problem is how I conceived it, and the idea that knowledge is local and dispersed, and that no central body, no central group of people can know or understand the various things that are going on in distant areas. The minutia of all the interactions among countless people that generate these signals, that price signals. Yeah, I think students are open to that message when they hear it. They just have never heard it before. And so learning about what prices mean, and if you're learning that if you're criticizing you're criticizing people for making profits, you're really sort of criticizing all humans. You're criticizing all your fellow humans for valuing certain things over others, and that's not exactly a healthy premise to begin with.
Right. I think the other word we struggle with, well, maybe we've lost, is value. So again, in the Austrian tradition, value is perceived by the customer. It's subjective. It's a sense that you're making my life better. You're improving my well-being. That's how I perceive value, and that's why I buy from you, and that's how you make a profit. But with things like shareholder value maximization and stakeholder value, we've kind of lost that. Do you talk about value in your courses?
We definitely talk about value, and we definitely go into this shift from shareholder to stakeholder. That's going to be a big component, because that's part of the ESG and the governance structure of ESG on that third prong. And it is highly problematic, and it is a great place to highlight where businesses are going unethical under the name of ethics. So if you want to define stakeholders as all society writ large, and you say, well, maybe it's the environment or whatever, well, you're able to brand yourself in certain ways. If you're no longer maximizing profits for shareholders, you can sort of redefine what success is for your corporation. If the standard is, are we profitable? Well, that's a pretty easy mathematical thing to figure out. Do we have more revenue and expenses? Then we're profitable. Are we making more profits this year than last year? Yes or no? But if you start redefining the purpose of your corporation to adding, contributing to the environment, or being socially responsible, or saying, do we work well with LGBTQ causes? Are we supporting Black Lives Matter? Are we doing enough with diversity, equity, inclusion? Well, once you start redefining success of a corporation enough, well, then you no longer have to start making profits. You can you could have a terrible year, but you could say, well, the purpose of our corporation is to do all these good things, and we may be losing money, but we're actually succeeding because we're doing all these other things. And that gives actually a lot of CEOs some cover, because CEOs these days, they don't stay in their office as long as they used to. So a CEO can come in for 5 years and sort of play with this stakeholder governance model and say, oh, look at all the success I generated over these last 5 years. We did this, we gave to this environmental thing, we reduced our energy consumption, we did all these things. And so, yeah, we're a successful company. But meanwhile, the company's tanking. And then the CEO after 5 years can just hop away and leave and go to the next position and have defined what he did as a success. But meanwhile, he's left a wake of disarray behind him.
Yeah, one of the frameworks we're trying to experiment with is customer capitalism, as opposed to ESG and stakeholder capitalism and so on like that. And even different from maximizing shareholder value, it's value is perceived by the customer, and that's what flows back to the business, initially as cash flow and eventually as profit. So we're trying to turn around that thinking. It's the customer that creates value, not the firm. Maybe that will help. I'm not sure. What do you think?
No, I think that's a very helpful way of framing the issue, because a lot of what businesses are doing, they're being responsive not to their consumers, not to their customers, but to some woke mob or some political activists who aren't actually interested in the product. They're just interested in pushing a social agenda, and they're figuring out ways to try to taint the reputation of businesses. But the businesses are suffering, and so are the actual consumers of the product, who are now having to pay higher prices because the businesses are spending all this money on ancillary things that really don't have anything to do with their product or their business model.
So you mentioned that you think that maybe we're regressing socially with some of the practices that we're adopting here. I was going to ask you a question about whether this level of criticism of business, the cynical attitude to business, is worse now than it has been in history. Although I think you said earlier, no, it's happened before. But anyway, help us with that. Are we in a particularly bad historical situation here, or just one of the cycles?
Well, I do think we're in a particularly bad historical moment, because we have never seen governments at this size and scale ever in human history. We have a sort of managerial mindset with government, where everybody, the first thing they think of is, there's a problem out there. How do we fix it? We get the government to pay for it. We get the government to do it. And meanwhile, when the government's not doing something well, it does still go to the private sector. I remember when the Obamacare, the little healthcare exchanges, and they weren't working, and the website wasn't working, and they couldn't get people to sign up. Where did they go to get people to fix it? They didn't go to their technicians within the government. They had to go to the private sector. And we know the private sector works better, but it has become just an ideological mass. And it's got just numerous bureaucrats and functionaries who are just towing the line, and it almost seems irreversible at this point. But so I wouldn't say I'm necessarily optimistic about the future. But on the other hand, sometimes good can come from a lot of bad. Sometimes the system has to sort of self-destruct in order for new opportunities to come about. And obviously I'd hate to see what that would mean for humans and all the suffering that would have to occur before we could get to a better place. But I'm just afraid of the size and scope of government and where we're headed.
Well, one of the solutions might be in the private sector and privatization. We were just talking the other day about the Coke Corporation, which has Coke Industries, maybe is the proper word for the company, which is a private company. It therefore has some special independence. They've got a system they use called market-based management, and it's very Austrian. It's very much driven by serving customers, and they seem to avoid some of these entanglements through the nature of their financing, which is private. So I wonder if that's one of the ways out, that definancialization, in the sense of not depending on government and Wall Street, might open up new avenues.
Well, I certainly wish there were more companies like Coke Industries. I know John Allison, when he was CEO of BB&T, instituted principles that were followed by the entire corporation. And since he's retired and BB&T and SunTrust have merged, it's become Truist. All that is sort of ancient history. But there are definitely businessmen, businesswomen, and businesses out there operating on good models and good principles. I think John Mackey is another great CEO. But I just wonder how much of that is going to matter in the end. Certainly, Coke Industries is a massive operation and doing great work. But I worry in particular with this ESG stuff, and in particular with the asset management companies and what they're doing and how they're investing all these state governments' all these state governments' pension money and into funds, and they're screening funds based on ideological reasons. And, sort of the BlackRocks and the Vanguards have just, they've amassed so much power. And now you've got these SEC people proposing ESG regs for securities and capital markets. And you've got all these companies that have sort of self-imposed ESG requirements. And they realize that on the market, they're going to lose by doing all this stuff. They can't compete with companies that don't do it. And so what they seek to do to level the playing field is lobby the government to institute all these ESG criteria that they're following so that they can then force the companies that are going to outcompete them to have to follow the same rules that they've imposed on themselves. And it's just sort of a never-ending cycle of government expansion. And by the way, that means there's a lot of corruption. All these measures that seek to get instituted by government are anti-competitive, meaning that it's harder for people to break into the markets. There are barriers to entries that get imposed. And the already powerful companies get bigger and more powerful. And this is the unethical side of business. This is the type of stuff that you want to show the students. Look, when government and business start colluding with each other, bad things happen. This is the evil corporation that you've seen in the Disney movies. This is what you're talking about. This is not private industry. This is not free markets. This is not commerce as it was sort of classically understood to be.
So we believe in entrepreneurship. It's present in Austrian economics. It's not present in mainstream economics. But we always believe that great entrepreneurs like the John Mackeys and people like that you mentioned can identify these situations, and through their brilliance and insight and new ways of creating value, they can, quote, solve that problem, unquote. Do you feel optimistic about entrepreneurial opportunities in this day and age? One example, obviously, is cryptocurrency, which entrepreneurs have figured out a way to disentangle money from government origination. So maybe there is hope.
Yeah, and even in some of these financial areas, like I know Vivek Ramaswamy has created this new Strive asset management that seeks to sort of depoliticize investment. And I see that as being a positive move and possibly a way to counteract some of the things that a company like BlackRock is doing. There's a long way to go. But, the beauty of entrepreneurship is that, you could ask me or you or whatever, and we have no idea what the answers are, what the solutions are. That's what the entrepreneurs out there do. They go out and they create new things in areas. I can sit here and point to problems all day, but I'm not smart enough. I don't have that sort of particular knowledge, and I don't even have the risk tolerance to go out and be an entrepreneur. But what these entrepreneurs do, for every few that fail, the ones that really succeed, man, do they add so much value to our lives, and we benefit so much from the risk they took. And, I think that's an ethic that is a positive message. So if there's anything I could say that's positive about this young generation, is you can tell them that, capitalism good, whatever, free markets are good, and they don't listen. But when you tell them innovation is good, when you tell them entrepreneurship is good, they nod their heads. They understand that. They all want to be entrepreneurs. They all want to go out and start their own companies and do things. And at least that is a positive sign.
Yeah, and my friend Kurt Carlson, who's been on this podcast a couple of times, he's at Worcester Polytechnic now, WPI, and he's got, across disciplines, he's got the university to agree to a certification that every student will work on in what he calls value creation and innovation, VC&I. And he just teaches the principles. And he regards it as a life skill, that if you learn that in college, it's something you can take through life. So I wonder if you're teaching your students life skills about ethical entrepreneurship and ethical business, they'll take through the rest of their lives, and that's a reason to be optimistic.
Well, we actually are. And in fact, we have decided that we're going to partner with FEE to bring in some speakers who will talk on economics and personal finance, who who will actually speak on entrepreneurship in particular. There's some sample talks is Unleash Your Inner Entrepreneur, The Economics of Your Dreams, The Secret of Win-Win, The Creativity of the Market, The Entrepreneurial Principles of Career Building, Starting a Profitable Business. So we're teaching that sort of stuff. Character and Leadership is another class. And then, just personal finance, personal finance skills. What does it mean to do different kinds of stocks and bonds and mutual funds? And, what are different kinds of insurance? And how have you thought about retirement? I know you're only 18 years old, but believe it or not, 60, 70, these ages come really fast. Are you thinking about retirement? Are you thinking about how to invest? Are you thinking about how much you're spending? Are you thinking about your student loans? Or did you just take out a bunch of student loans and say, meh, they'll probably get forgiven one day anyway. So yes, we are teaching these things. And I would love to have more students in the program so that we could teach more of them. And that's a personal goal of mine, is to really grow the program in terms of numbers so that we can reach more people. We are just now bringing our master's program online, which is excellent. We can reach more people. But how can we bring this free enterprise scholars program online? Or how can we at least reach more students?
I know you're getting encouragement from the rest of Troy University. We sometimes worry about the big picture universities and that they might be part of the regression. What kind of support are you getting?
I feel very supported right now. I work closely with administration at all levels, and I have felt that the university has embraced my efforts here. I will say one thing, not related to Troy, but one thing related to business schools, where business schools are getting pressure. I think more business schools would sort of maintain the line and not drift into what I'm calling wokeism if it weren't for some of the accrediting bodies. And of course, business schools don't have to submit themselves to particular accrediting bodies if they don't want to. They can, but I just want to give you a sample of some of these talks. So this particular accrediting body, I was looking at this conference that it's hosting, and the first talk is the societal impact of ESG, and it's really promoting ESG, a new value proposition for business schools. Learn how business schools can become the catalyst for change and develop leaders and partnerships to collectively make a positive impact. B schools must be committed to solving problems affecting not just businesses, but humanity as a whole. Well, then why is it called a business school? Why is it not called a humanities school? And, you'll find when you start looking at the people who are talking and the titles of their speeches that what they're doing really doesn't look a whole lot like something that actually is helping humanity as a whole. It looks like something that's helping a few select businesses, and it's helping a few particular industries gain the system. And but it's not really helping ordinary people. That's for sure.
One of the themes we try to develop at the Mises Institute, Alan, is what we call A school versus B school, the Austrian school versus the business school.
Yeah, I like that.
We point to some of those issues in business schools, and the Austrian school is a better set of perspectives to create value for society and for customers and for yourself as an entrepreneur. So that's
allow me to plug the master's program at the Mises Institute as well, because it is an MA program specifically in Austrian economics, and that makes it unique. And I have gone through every single syllabus of every single class, and man, I really wish I could do it. I wish I had the time to go back and do it, because the program is really impressive. I think Joe Becker is doing an amazing job. I am, of course, a big fan of the Mises Institute. I've been involved with the Mises Institute for a long time. And really, the Mises Institute has done a lot for me as well. And I live in Auburn, Alabama still, largely in part so that I can be close to the Mises Institute. So I commute a long way just so that I can stay close to Mises.
Well, Alan, thanks for all you do, not just for the Mises Institute, obviously, but for economics, for business, and for creating life skills among the students you're teaching, and hopefully they'll carry it forward into the next upward phase of business with ethics and value creation and everything that we'd like to see in the future. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. I really glad you had me on.
Economics for Business is a production of the Mises Institute. To explore more content like this, visit econ4business.com. And for more from Hunter Hastings, visit hunterhastings.com.